host, Shirley Lafond. I'm a therapist, SEN advisor, and mum to four wonderfully complex children. This space is for parents raising children with autism, ADHD, or both, and I'm really glad you're here today. So, today's episode is a special one because I'm joined by a wonderful guest, Dr. Norrine Russell, and she's the founder of Russell Coaching for Students. And her work focuses on helping complex students with ADHD, autism, anxiety, and learning differences, helping them to thrive both in and out of school. She's also been included in various non-profit agencies, including the Ophelia Project, Boys Initiative of Tampa, and the Girl Circle. She's also a fellow podcast host and author and mum of two neurodivergent children. And today we're going to talk about executive functioning, what it is, how it affects our children, especially the teens and young ones, and how as parents we can offer real support at home. So welcome, Dr. Russell, and it's a real pleasure to have you here.
Thank
Welcome.
you. Thank you so much. I'm delighted to be here. I think your work is so vitally important. All of us who are supporting parents of complex kids, I think we really need more and better support. So I'm thrilled that you've invited me and looking forward to our conversation today.
Oh, thank you. And to start us off, can you tell us a little bit about your background and what brought you to this work of neurodivergent children and their families?
Sure. And let me start by saying this is not at all what I had in mind when I was a psych major in college. I did, after college, go directly to graduate school and completed my master's and PhD with a focus on developmental psychology, which is really the focus of kind of healthy, normative, social, emotional, cognitive development. And so from there, I pursued a career in academia for several years, and then always had done applied research and advocacy work and moved full-time into nonprofit work for several years, doing youth development in Minnesota, New York, Florida, and then had my son in 2008. And like many of your listeners, he was a very complex pregnancy and a complex baby. And I really ended up finding myself in a position where it was best to retire from nonprofit work, and then moved into the coaching and consulting space, really without so much of a plan. And 16 years later, here we are, very much with a specialty in how to help children who are neurodiverse grow up with healthy, strong social, emotional, cognitive development. So I've kind of taken my core training in developmental psychology and now apply it to children who are neurodiverse.
Wow, that's amazing. Wow. And we're really grateful for your work. Absolutely. So, looking at executive functioning, so it's a term that we often hear about and it gets thrown around a lot. So, can you explain exactly what it is, to the context of autism, ADHD, and why it's so important for our children?
Absolutely. So, what I want people to understand is that executive functioning, the term might be new in the last 10 to 20 years, but really all the term means, because I hate for people to get hung up on jargon, is executive functioning is a set of life skills that's kind of the control system of your brain. Executive functioning skills refer to skills like memory, problem solving, starting tasks, finishing tasks, being aware of your thought processes, resisting impulses, staying on task. And, there are lots of different models of executive functioning, but they all really center around the skills we need to plan and to execute. And the planning and executing can be at home, at school, at work, in relationships, but it's basically the things we get up and think about. Okay, what do I need to do today? How can I get started? What if I feel stuck? What if I don't want to do that? What if I don't know what to do? And executive functioning skills are the thinking and emotional skills that help us to be productive every day. So just like you and I woke up this morning, we checked our calendar, we thought about, okay, what do we need to have ready? We got ourselves motivated, we got ourselves organized, we got our things together, our laptops, our notes, our pens, our coffees. That's really what executive functioning skills are. Now, that's the basics of it. And the reason why we talk about executive functioning skills so much with children who have ADHD or autism is that what we're really learning is that the primary deficit is this executive functioning. So for kids with ADHD, we've been talking about an attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. But I think everyone in the field kind of recognizes that's not really the whole picture. And so there are some who are really advocating for reframing ADHD as executive functioning disorder. Now, to be clear, because I want your listeners to understand, there is no such disorder right now. But what we talk about is how ADHD affects executive functioning. And there are particular ways in which the kind of inability for the brain to regulate attention, impulsivity, and motor planning really impact executive functioning for kids with ADHD. And the same is true for kids with autism, that their ability to be flexible, to plan, to think outside the box, to organize materials and information is affected. And so what the two diagnoses have in common is that children who are diagnosed with either one or both of these disorders are often delayed, and we want to make sure we use the right word there, in developing executive functioning skills. The skills can come, they can be taught, coached, practiced. That's what we do at Russell Coaching, but they often don't emerge as easily or as organically as in neurotypical kids. So with ADHD kids, we would often work on the executive functioning skills of sustaining attention, controlling impulses, organizing the materials in your backpack and for class, staying focused enough to get started on a task, finishing a task. All of those things are executive functioning skills. And I think what people are coming to realize is that this lens of executive functioning is so much more helpful than thinking about behavior, right? Because what's happened with these children who have ADHD or autism is we frame their symptoms as behavior, and then we draw really erroneous and judgmental and harmful conclusions about they're not motivated, they're not trying, they need to change their behaviors. And really what's underlying these symptoms is a developmental delay in skill development. So I know that's a lot. Help me understand where we need to further unpack that, please.
Okay. No, that's great. That's really, really interesting. So we kind of know what executive functioning looks like, but for different ages, they have different challenges. So perhaps maybe look at primary school age and teens. What differences might they come across going from primary to teenager? What kind of
Sure.
difficulties might they have?
Yeah. So in primary school, really the developmental task is learning how to read and how to learn. And there's a lot of emotional self-regulation that needs to happen during those years, right? We need to learn how to settle our bodies. We need to learn how to interact with our peers in the classroom. We need to learn when to talk and why to talk and how to ask questions. We need to learn how to be a learner. And at home, with homework and, you know, chores and personal care and hygiene, we're still learning all of those things in the primary years, right? And the parent's job in many ways is to teach and to manage, right? And the challenges that children often have at that age are impulse control, organization, time management, and a skill that develops much later, metacognition, thinking about how am I approaching this and how can I make it better? If I'm frustrated about my maths homework every day, what could I do differently? That's a skill that develops much later. That's why teachers and parents are still so vitally important during these primary years, because kids are learning how to self-regulate. When we move into the high school years, the expectation is that students have learned those basic self-regulation tools, both in their emotions and in their behaviors, right? They know how to interact with peers. They know how to self-advocate. They know how to interact with a teacher. They know how to collect papers from different courses and organize them. They know when a test is coming and how to study. Now, what happens with our students with ADHD and autism is that because those skills can be delayed, we often see in the primary years that those students are sometimes 2, 3, 4 years behind their peers. And so then they get labeled as lazy, unmotivated, careless, not trying, right? But it's really just a question of their brains haven't caught up to where their peers are at. So I think the difference is in the primary years, our boys and girls are learning how to self-regulate, and in the high school years, they're being expected to self-regulate and produce work independently. But in either case, our kids who are atypical struggle with meeting those age-appropriate expectations, and they require very specific scaffolding and support. And often what happens, unfortunately, is they simply get told, try harder. And that's really not the solution to a lack of skills.
Yeah, yeah. It probably um further like dampens their self-esteem as well, doesn't it? Yeah. Do you notice a difference at all between um dependent on whether a child has autism or ADHD or both? Is there a difference in their executive functioning or how they pick things up?
Yes, definitely. So one of the metaphors that's used for ADHD is, and this would apply more to a child who's hyperactive than a child who has inattentive ADHD, but the metaphor is that the foot is permanently on the gas pedal. Go, 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 go. The body is in motion, the brain is in motion, the eyes are in motion, looking everywhere, darting everywhere. Sometimes the mouth is constantly in motion, right? The gas pedal is pressed to the floor on go. And so the challenge really for those kiddos is learning how to stop, how to pause, how to slow down, how to regulate their speed. And so that characterizes our children with ADHD, regardless of the age, really. Our children with autism are sometimes characterized as having a foot permanently pressed on the brake pad in the car. Wait, stop. I don't understand. That feels overwhelming. That doesn't make sense to me. I'm overwhelmed with sensory input. Wait, I need to organize that. And so often their task is to figure out how to start things and how to kind of in many ways be flexible, which is an executive functioning skill, right? If my child with autism really prefers things to be done one way, right? I want to make the sandwich this way, or I want to do the math worksheet this way, or I want to read the book this way, right? but they're being asked to do it a different way, they have to practice a lot of flexibility. And we know that sometimes that rigidness is simply a characteristic, a symptom of autism. And so the metaphor is more the foot is constantly on the brake pedal. Wait, stop, slow down. Let me figure this out. Let me do it my way. Now, when we take the examples of our many children who have both ADHD and autism, they have one foot on the gas, go, go, go all the time, and one foot on the brake, stop, stop, stop all the time. And so then we have to teach the complete set of executive functioning skills in order for them to figure out how to regulate the go. So they're at the right, if I can further use this metaphor, speed limit for class or for home, and how to let off the brake so that they can move forward. So I don't know. I hope your listeners find that a useful metaphor. I often think of it when I think of why is it so complicated to have both ADHD and autism? Because it's like trying to drive a car with, the gas pedal fully depressed and the brake pedal fully depressed.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I can totally relate to some of that as well. And that's a really good metaphor, thinking of them as a car going, stopping, starting, not stopping, should I say. And yeah, that's great. So, okay, let's talk about some practical support. So, parents are in the thick of it, the morning school runs, homework battles. What are some realistic things that parents can do to support executive functioning?
One of the things that I think is such an important transition to make is to move from verbal cueing to visual cueing. So many times we as parents get stuck in a loop of, do you have your backpack? Do you have your materials? Do you have your lunchbox? Are your teeth brushed, right? It's this endless verbal cycle every morning. Get your socks and shoes on, get your sports bag, right? One of the most important things we can do in helping children build their own executive functioning skills is move that to visual cueing. So one of the things that I talk with almost every parent about at my practice when I'm doing parent coaching is order a set of sheet protectors, make a list, have your child make the list. If the list needs to be in pictures rather than words, start there. But get yourself out of the cycle of being the reminder service. Start cueing your child to say, you know what, your list for the day is posted on the door. Your list for school is posted on the door. And you know what? We just have to make peace with that. When I was a mom of young children, we had several sheet protectors with, typed out sheets posted on our doors, on our bathroom mirrors, on our refrigerator, sometimes even on the kitchen counter for homework routine. But I knew that it was so important to not just verbally cue them all the time, because that makes them reliant on us. Whereas if we can teach them the skill of, you know what, let's sit down and map out together everything that you need for school in the morning. Let's make a list, right? And you can make this fun for children who enjoy, artistic creativity, what color, what font, what background, I mean, kids these days know how to use all kinds of, basic graphics programs. Make the list, and then your job is simply to refer them to the list. Let me know when you have everything done. And the same thing can be used for a bedtime routine, for bath routine. I've had parents actually hang the sheet protector in the shower stall saying, these are the things that you need to do. Because while our children are often open to our reminders in the early years, eventually this does come back to what you were saying earlier, becomes a question of self-esteem, right? I can't remember, I'm frustrated. Then the child is frustrated. It affects the relationship between parent and child. And so we want to be teaching independence. And so honestly, one of the most important things that you can do is teach your child and support them in making their own schedules and to-do lists. And this is one of the ways in which people with ADHD successfully cope with life, right? They develop routines, they develop systems, they, have a set of things that they do every morning in the same order so they don't forget it. And so I think if we just take that one step further as parents and we map it out and we put it on paper, then we're teaching the child a skill that they need for their entire life. The other, I think, practical tip that I have for parents that I encourage parents to use all the time is positive motivation and encouragement. It's so very easy, is it not, to get frustrated, especially with our kids with ADHD. They can make us bonkers, absolutely bonkers. And so developing a few phrases like, I have confidence that you can do this. I know you can figure this out. I'm going to take a little break and go get myself ready. And I think when I come back, you really will be able to have most of this done. And then after you've said your positive motivational words, expressing confidence in your child, leave the room, go back to your bedroom, your office, give the child 5 minutes to collect themselves and get things done. But I think that combination of praise, encouragement, motivation, and then leave the room so the child doesn't look to you as what some people would call, maybe a crutch. But you've got to start with that. You can do this because we know that children with ADHD receive many, many more negative feedback comments and are often stuck in kind of a negative feedback loop. And the same is true for children with autism who are constantly being told, be flexible, try it this way, do it this way. You can't stay stuck, And so we really do need to focus on the positive messaging. You can do this. You can figure this out. It might not be easy, but I believe in you. My son now, who's almost 17, says all the time to other people, I believe in you. And it just makes me giggle and laugh because I hope that he's internalized that message from me. I don't know. I've never asked him, but it does make me giggle when he says, I believe in you. You've got this.
Oh, that's great. That's so encouraging, isn't it? Yeah, especially when they, grow up and then try to motivate other people as well. That's really good. Yeah, and I totally understand about you saying that to giving your child that, to do the list themselves, giving them that independence. Yeah, because I have clients that, they'll write lists down and then put them up and their child will take them down, but then it's because it was totally from them. If they get involved from the beginning and do their own list, then they're responsible for that. And it gives them some, encouragement themselves. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And the parent's role is to just be curious. You can ask a kindergartner, a first grader, a third grader, what does it take for us to be ready in the morning? What does that look like? And then just, sit, wait, do the crossword, do the puzzle of the day, let them think about it. They know, they really do. And to your point, when they've created the list, then they're so much more proud of themselves to complete that list and to use the list. When we tack it up as just another, like, don't bother me, you know, here's your jobs, that doesn't feel good.
No, absolutely. No, that's right. So a lot of these executive functioning struggles also show up in schools as well. So what can parents be doing to sort of, if they notice that their child is falling behind for any reason, what could they do?
Yeah. This is a tough one because I think these skills, while we're certainly aware of them in our educational settings, I don't know that many schools have figured out how to help our atypical students build these skills. So there are a lot of things that a typical child would naturally kind of gain from school. Oh, the teacher posts the homework. Oh, I understand now. We have daily homework. We need to get that done. Oh, the teacher puts out a basket for you to put your papers in, right? That's great for 50%, maybe up to 80% of your classroom, but then there are going to be students who learn differently, who are not intuitively catching on to those systems that teachers create. And not all teachers create them either, right? So I think the first step is identifying where is the child struggling and having a conversation with the teacher, and that might be something as simple as, we're having a hard time keeping track of homework. What is the classroom system, right? Where is the homework supposed to go so that I can help Mason look for that homework when he gets home, right? Where does this, spelling quiz belong? Like, as parents, we need to get into what system is set up. And then it opens the door also, if the teacher is not using a system that the child can adopt, then we have to individually work with that teacher or that student to create a system. For example, one of the things that we do at our practice is for students who are still on a paper system at school, and they've got, handouts and homework sheets and, things that are torn out of workbooks. Everyone gets a red folder at Russell Coaching, and you just tuck everything in the red folder during the day, then you come home and organize it. Some students don't need that. They've got systems at school that work for them. But if they don't, then we use the red folder system. Just put everything in the red folder, because we don't want all those crumpled up pieces of paper at the bottom of the backpack, right? We can sort it out at home. So I think for parents, trying to understand what are the classroom systems and routines, if there are not sufficient systems and routines, which will happen at times, then working with the teacher to bring their awareness to the fact that your child needs some help in this area and asking for their help. Your child might have a school plan. I think we are still challenged, though, in schools in terms of helping our kids who learn differently with these executive functioning skills. And it does often fall to parents outside of school if you're not the student who's catching on naturally to these things. I think a lot of what parents can also do is model this at home, which doesn't mean it's going to necessarily carry over to school, but have a dedicated homework space, have a bin where papers go, have a trash can where the child works so they can throw things out, kind of model and set up what is a good system so that eventually that might carry over to the child and their own workspace. But it is, I think this is an area where education systems across the globe are really struggling with this idea of, oh, it's not simply telling the student, you have to get organized, sit there and put these papers away, or you have to keep better track of your stuff. We're really starting to realize this is a skill, but we don't yet know how to teach and coach it in most schools.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. Yeah, and it is really quite challenging for them as well. Yeah. So I was thinking about emotional support as well. So sometimes I hear from parents who worry that their child is losing confidence because they can't keep up, especially sort of teens. What can we do to help support their emotional resilience as well?
It's such an important question, right? We know that our cultures and societies have changed dramatically in certainly the last 10 years, the last 20 years. Electronics and technology have really deeply altered the way we interact with one another in the world. One of the first things I think that we can do with our students with ADHD and autism is to normalize their experience, right? To acknowledge it, to say, you might be struggling with this, and that's temporary, and you will learn how to do it. But I want you to know that I see that you're struggling and you're trying, right? I think without normalizing the frustration, the struggle, the feeling of I'm different, especially as we get to puberty and adolescence, we don't really address the core problem, right? The student feels different, they feel inadequate, they see people around them, they have increased social competence, so they're seeing the people around them who can put the homework paper correct, who can, master all the vocabulary words, who don't get criticized in class for speaking out too often. And so I think we have to normalize and explain to our children who are wired differently why it is that their brains work like that, and that their brains are plastic, they're moldable, and they can learn these things. And this is what the plan is, right? Because that's when we feel best and we feel empowered. Someone sees us, they understand us, and they're going to help us, right? And I don't think it's a question of simply saying, oh, don't worry, you'll catch up, or oh, don't worry, everyone is different in their own way. I think really going more deeply into, there are parts of your brain that are going to mature a little faster than other people, and there are parts of your brain that are going to mature a little slower than people. And that's okay. No one is completely typical or normal. Let me share with you a story of what we've been struggling with at my house. My son was a very early reader and a very proficient reader, reading at a college level in first grade. So obviously, that's quite advanced in reading, right? Now, what I also want to say to people is that wasn't always such a good thing, because he was constantly, chronically bored in elementary school because he knew most of that material and he could read it quite proficiently and quickly and answer, the information. Nevertheless, I think being an early proficient reader was a skill. Now he's 16 and we're trying to learn how to drive, and that is requiring a lot of motor coordination. And he is so frustrated with the motor coordination that driving requires, and the focus and the concentration. And he is a child who has ADHD, autism, and anxiety. And driving lessons, not the book learning, right? Not the online part of the course, but the actual, how do I move the steering wheel? How much do I pump the brake? How do I adjust the dials while I'm driving? How do I do the turn signal? All of that has been incredibly frustrating for him. And after, I think it was a third kind of meltdown with an individual one-on-one, driving instructor that is absolutely wonderful, I finally just said, you know what, buddy, I think we just need to take a break and let your brain develop maybe for 3 or 6 months and try this again. You were very advanced when it came to speaking and reading. Your brain was ahead of many kids your age. And it's okay if it's going to take you some extra time to learn how to drive. And so in some places, we are ahead of other people, and in some places we're going to be kind of behind the norm, but it's all okay. You are eventually going to learn how to drive. And we decided to just take a break for 3 to 6 months. And
Yeah.
it was hard for me because I was using that normative age in the US of you get your permit, then you get your license. And, he's already 16 and a half. He doesn't have his license. So we were already, in quotes, behind, which we're not really behind because we're on his timetable. But I really had to step back and say, while he cognitively knows how to drive, he needs to mature emotionally and mentally in order to be able to handle driving. And that's one of the things that I think I always encourage parents to do is, right size the developmental challenges for your child, provide the scaffolding they need while also consciously working to decrease that scaffolding. So in my case, for example, we made an appointment with the driving instructor for 3 months from now, right? Because I don't want the answer to be, oh, you weren't ready to drive now, so we're just going to ignore it for another year or two, right? We're going to try again in 3 months. If he's not ready then, we're going to try again in 3 months. We don't want to get in the habit of doing things for our kids that they can do for themselves. So bringing back to your question of emotional resiliency, I think right sizing the challenges and expressing faith and confidence that your child will be able to do this, your child or your teen when the time is right for them is important. And then ultimately, right, what do we know? We know human beings need connection. And so forget about the driving lesson, take them to breakfast, go to McDonald's, go for a bike ride. What human beings need is connection. And that is true for our kids who are wired differently as well.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely correct. I had a similar driving experience, and we did have to take a break, although he hasn't gone back to it yet, which he should do. Absolutely. But yeah, it just wasn't working. He couldn't get all the bits together at the same time, and yeah, so it just didn't quite work out. But no, I'm sure he'll be back on it again, though. Yeah,
Yeah.
I can totally relate to that.
Yeah.
So, also on the flip side of that, parents are tired. So, what would you say mums and dads who feel emotionally burnt out, trying to trying to hold everything together, what kind of advice can you give to them?
This is hard
This is
work.
hard
This is
work.
really hard parenting work. It truly, genuinely is. And I find for myself, it helps to acknowledge that. We don't want to get stuck there, right? But we want to acknowledge the work of raising a child with ADHD or autism or both, plus perhaps a learning difference, is hard work. And so I think just acknowledging that to ourselves and acknowledging how it really does call on us to be, healthcare advocates and I mean, healthcare experts and educational advocates and, peer support for our kids with, peer relationship struggles. I think that's the first thing is acknowledge to yourself to the extent that it's useful for you that you are doing a lot of work. The second thing I think is find a community that works for you. This might not be your neighbors. It might not be your mom's group. It might not be the PTA, right? But there are so many communities of parents online who are raising kids who are similar to your child. Not the same, right? Some different things, but there are so many online communities of parents with kids who are atypical. Find a community that provides you with support that feels right for you. And then the third suggestion I would have is you don't need to do everything, right? Going back to this idea of stop verbally cueing and start using visual cues, you don't need to do everything. We look at our kids and sometimes we see the developmental delays. And so we rush in to fix and to solve and, to make them happy and to prevent the meltdowns and the anger. But there is a lot of reason to take yourself to your bedroom, your office, your bathroom, and let your child struggle with it and wrestle with it. It is okay for your child to struggle and wrestle a little bit. One of the parents I'm currently working on is a parent whose child has had severe emotional dysregulation and has, you know, really been in danger of self-harm. And it has been difficult for this mom to get out of the habit of preventing even the mildest unhappiness because her perspective is informed by the fact that, you know, this child of hers has, you know, self-harmed in the past. But we can't make it happen, especially as we get to the teenage and the young adult years. There is a value in struggling. And so my third suggestion is really you don't need to be, what are they calling it these days? The snowplow parent, moving all of the snow out of the way so your child can have a clear path. It is okay for your child to struggle, to wrestle, and to be unhappy, and trust your gut and let it go a little more than you might be comfortable with.
No, absolutely, absolutely. And I think as well, if you do allow your child just to, you know, to not go it alone, but I mean, as a parent, you can say, I'm going to leave this with you, and
Mhm.
when you need me, I'll be there. But it
Mm.
just gives them so much satisfaction, especially, when they get to achieve something of their own as well. And yes, they struggled, but it's not even just the end goal, it's the effort that they've put into it. They've worked so hard for it. And all of that is extremely valuable. And that's why it's better than just giving them the end result. So it means that they can experience as well the journey, which is so important as well. Yeah. No, that's fantastic.
I think what you've said is so important for parents as a takeaway. Explain to your toddler, your child, your teenager, your young adult, I'm going to provide this amount of support and I have faith and trust in you and I will be right here, right? We're better at doing that when our kiddos are little, but making it explicit what you've just said. Listen, I know you're kind of struggling with this college choice, or I know you're struggling with the fact that you're having a hard time making your car payment, or you're struggling with whether or not you want to break up with this person. I'm going to be right here and you can always come and talk it through with me. If I have some perspective, I'll offer it, but make it clear to your child that you're not just hanging them out to dry, or, letting them get, their knees skinned in life. I have faith that you're going to make some progress on this and I'm going to be here when you need me. But what you've just said is so valuable. Explain that to them so they don't feel left or alone or abandoned. Because again, going back to kind of the core deficits of ADHD and autism, our kiddos with those conditions don't necessarily pick up on the subtleties of what we're trying to communicate emotionally. So we have to make it explicit. So I just found what you had to say so valuable there, and I wanted to reiterate it.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. And yeah, we're coming to the end now, but you've also written a book and host a podcast. So where can our listeners find you or hear from you?
Thank you for asking. Yes. So the easiest place to get started learning more about Russell Coaching and about the services we provide to students and parents is to go to russellcoaching.com. And you can also just Google me, Norrine Russell. You'll find me fairly easily. Um, the book that I wrote was designed to help parents become really effective advocates for their kids with ADHD. It's called Asking the Right Questions About ADHD Before, During, and After the Diagnosis. Because in my experience, and in the experience of hundreds of parents I've worked with, we don't know what questions to ask. And yet, in many ways, we are expected to be guiding this process. And so the book, Asking the Right Questions About ADHD, is designed to help parents know what to ask at the doctor, at the psychologist, during the evaluation process, during the IEP or 504 meeting. And then my podcast is Breaking Out of the Box, Understanding ADHD, Autism, and Anxiety. And it can be found on any and all of the podcast site, Breaking Out of the Box by Norrine Russell. So if you want to find all of our socials, all of that is listed at russellcoaching.com.
That's fantastic. I'll also put them in our list as well. And finally, what's one piece of encouragement that you would like to leave parents with today?
I think the most important thing to keep in mind is that our children and our teenagers are infinitely more capable than what they tend to show us as parents. And so I would say gauge what you think your child or teenager is capable of by what you see them doing outside the home, not their behavior with you. And then just know that it's your love and your connection with your child that is ultimately the most important thing. So go for the ice cream, take them to McDonald's, go on vacation, let the interventions and the coaching and all of the um, pressure that we feel, let it go at times and just enjoy whatever it is, Legos, Instagram, YouTube, whatever it is that your child is into.
Oh, that's fantastic. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Russell. Thank you so much for joining us today. You've shared so many valuable insights, And I know so many parents will feel will be feeling heard, supported, and a little more hopeful, definitely after that. And to our listeners today, if the episode resonated with you, please share it with someone that you think that might need it. You can find the links to Dr. Russell's coaching book and podcast in the show notes below. And as always, be gentle with yourself, and you're doing much better than you think. And thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode. Thank you again, Dr. Russell.
Thank you for having me.